own screenplay nominee podcast where we talk about films that were solely nominated for an Oscar in the writing categories. I'm your host, Matthew Anderson, and today we have Roberto Ortiz. Welcome to the show, my man. How are you doing today?
Thank you for having me. I'm doing real good. Really good.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah.
And for the record, we should also say before we go any further into the show, as of today, we're recording on November 17th at the moment. I was not able to, on the last episode, I wasn't able to talk about any of the SAG strike ending because literally I was on vacation and the episode I had recorded previously had been done about a month or two ahead of time since I was going to be going on vacation in Hawaii. I'm back. So just real quick, we could just talk about the SAG after strike, about it being for now over with an asterisk because they're still, looking over the agreement and voting on whether or not this deal will be what we go with for SAG with the AMPTP. So yeah, any quick comments you want to make about that, Roberto?
I'm just hoping, just hoping they get what they want, and I just want this all to be over, so you know that they can just get a fair deal. Is all. It's just
Mhm.
important.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
it definitely is. And now, and hopefully we're, as I said this before on various episodes, and I'll say it again, actors and writers are especially important within the industry because they're the backbones of what makes these CEO and these executives within Hollywood money. There's no way. I don't know about you, but I don't know how you could market something like the color purple, let's say, or the Iron Claw, or let's say Aquaman 2, or any of these like bigger budgeted studio movies. Well, Iron Claw is from A24, but you get my drift. It's a big, heavy ensemble film. I don't know how you can market these kind of movies without your actors and your writers there on the press tours. So yeah, so hopefully we get a fair deal out of this. Whatever happens. But in the meantime, we just want to say congrats on getting a tentative agreement. Let's see what happens. So, but yeah. So, anyways, yeah. So that's pretty much all I wanted to say about that. I was going to mention that on the last week's episode, but like I said, it was recorded ahead of time, and we were not aware when the episode was going to go up whether or not the strike was going to be over. So that's that. So before we dive into our episode, I have some questions to ask you, Roberto.
Yeah.
Would you care to explain to our audience what exactly it is you do for a living, or what you've been doing for the last month or so?
Uh, like what I do, like on social media, or
Well, just like what what's your job per se? Are you like a film critic, or
yeah,
uh, you go ahead?
I, I guess I would consider myself that. Try to see every movie possible and write about it. I post most of my reviews on Instagram and Letterbox, and I just love movies. It's my passion.
Nice,
It's just an awesome thing, and
awesome.
I think it's important that you have fun while writing, and that it's always the best part.
Yeah, if you don't have fun writing or
Yeah,
talking about movies, then I have a feeling you're going to make it a pretty boring job or
yeah,
a chore to get through for sure. So you got to at least put some spice into it for sure.
yeah.
So,
You know,
yeah, go ahead.
even movies that I don't like, I always make it. At least I always try to my best to show the good things about the movie that worked and then what
Mhm.
didn't work. Because I don't want to write a review saying, "No, this movie sucks altogether. Don't watch it." No, because every movie, no matter how bad it is, there's always charm, and I always try to shine a light on that.
Yeah, there's a lot of effort that goes into making a movie. The same thing with me though. I'm very much like, even if it's unless if it's something to where it's like wasted my time, like creatively, and there's like a huge budget attached to it, then it's like, yeah, I think I have a little bit of a right to step on it, to look a gift horse in the mouth and s- you know kick mud in their face at times, but I try not to for the most part because there's also a lot of like smaller independent films that are trying to get off the ground and are actually trying to become something. So yeah, that was my first question. The other question I always ask my guest, it's always tough to ask someone what their favorite film is. So I might as well ask, what is your favorite genre of film?
Uh Probably drama, I would say.
Okay.
Is well, what I really like is if you put like a person who's known for comedy and you put them in a drama, that always attracts me. That is, for example, like Steve Carell. If you put him in drama, I will always watch that. I just love drama because it's always a very an emotional and you really see something deeper when you watch it, especially character studies. Those ones are I think are always the best.
Yeah, the other actor when you brought up Steve Carell and you said you love comedic actors turn dramatic work. I always think of Robin Williams,
Mhm. Oh
even
my
though
god,
he's like the go-to answer for a lot of people. But yeah, Steve Carell, yeah, he's done some good dramas. The biggest one actually came to my mind was Foxcatcher.
that is actually
Um,
hold on. I have the poster for it.
oh, you got the poster, nice,
It's
awesome.
top five of one of my favorite movies of all time. I loved that movie to death. It is. I consider it one of the great masterpieces of cinema. I don't know why. It's just when I watched it, I fell in love with the movie. Everything just worked for me.
Nice. Yeah.
Mhm.
It's a shame. Well, I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm glad it got the Oscar nominations it got, but if it had been a lone screenplay nominee, it could have potentially been a film that we could have easily discussed on the show. But yeah, I'm pretty sure I discussed a little bit about the Oscar prospects of that with the Nightcrawler episode I did a while back. So if you're interested in, check out our discussion for that. We talked briefly upon our Foxcatcher analysis on it. But anyway, so we're not here for that. We're here to talk about a film that you have selected, Election, which was a film from 1999. This won't be a beat by beat bulletin presentation like you hear on other channels, but we will be discussing major spoilers for our, talk, so to speak. If you haven't seen the film yet and want to hear our full thoughts on it, watch the film and then come back to hear us talk about it. So in 1996, producers Albert Berger and Ron Yerxa, I believe that's how you pronounce his name. I could be wrong. Sent Alexander Payne an unpublished manuscript by Tom Perrotta called Election. At first, Alexander was uninterested in having this to be his next film he wanted to make after uh, what was the film called? It was on the tip of my tongue. What was the film he had done? I'm looking through his filmography real quick. Citizen Ruth. That's what it was. So it was so. At first, Alexander was uninterested in having this be his next film to make after Citizen Ruth until he read the manuscript and was intrigued by the idea of using multiple point of views and multiple voiceovers. Filming for the film began on fall of 1997 in Omaha metro area, with the high school sequences shot at Pavilion La Vista Senior High School. Like many of Alexander's films, he also used non-professional actors to be part of the shoot and managed to get them their big break in Hollywood, like Chris Klein, who would go on to be a part of the American Pie series. I haven't seen the American Pie series, and
I
they're probably not my thing.
yeah
But I know plenty of people who have. So yeah, so that that Chris Klein would, this was sort of his like big out, what was it, breakout role, I should say. So, after spending over a year in post production, Election was released in theaters on April 23rd, 1999, and was unfortunately a box office disappointment, making an estimated $17.2 million on a production budget of ranging between 8.5 to 25 million. I'm assuming that even if this were $8.5 million, you'd have to, 2.5 times your production budget, because you're covering the you're not only breaking even, but you're also covering some of the marketing costs as well. So the film did receive critical acclaim with critics and audiences, though, and ended up with a lone adapted screenplay nomination for Alexander Payne and Jim Taylor. It also received a Golden Globe nomination for Reese Witherspoon in the lead actress comedy musical category, and even won the Writers Guild of America award for adapted screenplay over Oscar nominated films like The Cider House Rules, which would go on to win the Academy Award, The Insider, and The Talented Mr. Ripley. I believe October Sky was the fifth nominee at the Writers Guild of America, if I'm not mistaken.
holy
It
hell.
also it also won 3 Independent Spirit Awards for Best Feature, Director, and Screenplay. As of now, I should say, as of this recording, there's a sequel to the book Election that's called Tracy Flick Can't Win. It was written by Tom Perrotta and published in 2022, last year actually.
Oh shit.
The last time I checked, it's in the process of possibly being made for Paramount Plus, with Alexander Payne and Reese Witherspoon returning. But for all we know, maybe Paramount Pictures just says, axe the project, sell it off, for fire insurance, like Warner Brothers has been doing with their projects. So we may never know.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So interesting. So while I was watching this, I was interested in knowing a couple things. Now that we're getting into our movie discussion, section of the film, I wanted to ask, what was your reasoning for picking this? And I assume you've already seen this movie before. Am I correct in saying that?
Yes, of course.
Okay. So yeah, so I'm curious to know what was your reasoning in picking this movie out of the list that I gave you.
It's funny because one, I love Alexander Payne. I don't think
Okay.
there's a movie I didn't like from him. And two, it's funny because I recently watched it when you gave me that list. Like I had just freshly watched it, and I loved it. It's
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and it's a film. It'll be a fun discussion because it's a comedy, and there's just a lot to talk about because of how creatively it was made. So I knew it was gonna be a fun discussion.
Nice. Yeah. I haven't seen this movie. I've seen a handful of his films. I had seen Sideways. I think it was my first movie. No, it was The Descendants. I'd seen The Descendants first. I cannot remember how I saw it, but I eventually saw it on Blu-ray whenever it was. And then I think I went back to Sideways. I watched that. That was good. And I'm trying to think if there's anything else I've seen from him. I didn't see Downsizing.
You're not missing much. Never mind.
Okay, yeah.
I did not like Downsizing. I just liked it for no reason because I didn't think of that movie. Downsizing, that one I did not like. I thought it's a bit pretentious. I don't know. I could tell the message he was going for when it came to global warming, but the execution was very, very bad. However, watch it for Hong Chow. That's all I
Yeah,
gotta
no,
say.
that's what I heard too. It was like in fact, I actually was predicting that year Hong Chow to get nominated, but all it took for her was to do something like The Whale, which was a much more popular film for critics and audiences alike. But yeah, so then so he did Downsizing, which I believe was like a passion project of his, and he wanted to do since Sideways, and hence it took him for years to make that movie, and then finally did it, and box office flop, mixed reception at best. And then he does The Holdovers recently, which is part of the reason why I'm glad you picked Election, uh, because The Holdovers is now out in theaters, or at least I think it's doing a whole slow wide release as the weeks are going by. And yeah, so that's part of the reason why we're doing this. And I'm like I said, I'm really glad that we're going to be discussing this film in general, because I have some interesting thoughts on it to begin with. So you said before, like you had said, you would was it you already seen the film before, you had enjoyed it. I hadn't seen it before. This was my first viewing. And I'm glad to report, I guess, that I enjoyed it enough. I thought it was a good movie, and one that I personally enjoyed. I will say that at times, and I know some of it was very intentional with the way that Alexander Payne is presenting the story, but at times it did feel a bit uncomfortable for me, just because especially with the whole teacher having relationship with Reese Witherspoon's character Tracy Flick, and then with the whole potential affair that uh, our main character might get himself into. So it was one of those where I was like, okay, yeah, it's a little bit much, I will say, but like I said, but it's sometimes you got to get out of your comfort zone to try to appreciate new things in life. Movie wise, I should say,
Yeah.
watching movies, not that. So yeah, but when it was over, I was like, okay, I appreciate it, and if nothing else, watching some of the behind the scenes stuff for the making of the movie they did, because I saw some of the bonus content on Criterion, it made me appreciate what the filmmakers were trying to do, and again, just doing a fun, quirky, dark comedy with a bit of a bite to it for sure. And it's something that, like I said, I appreciated and I really enjoyed. Maybe not fall in love with it as much as everyone else did though. If I were to rewatch it again, maybe because I now know what I'm kind of getting myself into on a rewatch. But as it was, I enjoyed it as a whole.
Good.
So, out of curiosity, though, were there any like standouts for you from the film?
Reese Witherspoon easily, especially at such a young age. She kills it, man. It's especially the way she carries herself in the movie. She is so bratty. My God,
Hmm.
she
Yeah,
was just easily the best part. I also really liked Matthew Broderick, and then he he just adds so much to the character, and it was perfect casting. I have to say, perfect. For me at least.
yeah, he fits the role enough. The yeah, he's definitely one that he's not really the like my favorite actor in the world per se, but he's done a couple roles where he's like, okay, he fits the role. Like Ferris Bueller, he fits that really well. It was funny because I think it was I want to give a quick shout out to Miles Hughes, who was on the podcast before. He mentioned he had just seen Election for the first time this past week, or however long it was. He was mentioning on Awards Radar. He finds it's funny how Matthew Broderick's playing this, the anti Ferris Bueller, because it, with him in the shower, him, he's essentially him playing the like uh the teacher who was what was it Einstein, not Einstein, who the hell was that guy, the I cannot remember for the life of me what the hell his name was. He was in the movie. He was in Ferris Bueller's Day Off, and he's the one who's like
Oh,
Bueller.
him. I know who you're
Um,
talking about.
yeah, like him. He's playing that character. It's very much like this is his like Matthew Broderick never had a day off, and was very much a curmudgeon, boring character, so to speak, and so that's why it was like the anti Ferris Bueller, and I'm like, yeah, it's kind of a good choice as to why you pick him for the role. But yeah, and Reese Witherspoon, yeah, this was definitely. I haven't seen a whole lot of Reese Witherspoon's performances outside of her Oscar-nominated work with Walk the Line and Wild, which she's pretty good in both. Yeah, I'd say maybe this might be my favorite of hers to begin with, because she's very the thing about playing this character, and I'm not sure if you're going to agree with me on this, is it's tough to play a character this whiny and very like over knowing without being too annoying. Like, we want to feel compassion for the character, we want us to feel bad for her at some point, because you know her being in a relationship with an older man, and then her you know still thinking, never thinking it was a bad idea to begin with, or I guess in her eyes okay with, it you kind of feel bad for the kid, because she was manipulated and brainwashed by an adult to be in this relationship, um and yeah, and that's something I'm like, okay, that's interesting. Again, the way that Alexander Payne paints that in the movie. Yeah. I was that definitely caught me off guard when that happened. I was like, what's going on here? like,
Yeah, no, especially that his excuse was the teachers was like, but she likes my book, even though he didn't even write the thing, but the fact that
yeah,
she liked his like idea was enough for him to like justify it, because I guess he was kind of
yeah,
starving for like a different kind of attention.
yeah,
But it's like,
and
my God.
yeah, and we'll probably get more into it a bit later, but I loved how there were two scenes with Reese Witherspoon I really liked. One was the way she was being directed to jump up and down like a pogo stick when she finds out from one of the students that she's won the election by one vote. And that was great in terms of like Reese Witherspoon having that energy in her, and when you need an actor like her to display that charming and an affection for very naturally, and who's very bubbly, and she does a great job with that. And the other scene I loved was when she saw Paul. I think it was it Paul? I believe the Chris Klein's character, when she saw his posters hanging up in the hallway, and she just starts tearing it down, and
Hmm.
then she has all these like blisters and bloody marks on her like palms and whatnot. I thought that was pretty great, and then she just takes them all out and puts them in a bag, and just drives away to the industrial plant, garbage, almost like she. And I love how it's framed and shot like she murdered someone.
Yes.
And I love that. I thought, oh, that's perfect. You're shooting this and framing this almost like she murdered someone, and then she's disposing of the bag, and then you see, I think it was Tammy. It was Tammy from a distance seeing this all unfold. So I thought that was great.
No, I just love it because it was just, I don't know how they came up with that, because that is just funny how it was basically her doing murder is how it was framed. And
Mhm.
God, I wonder. What I really wonder is how they really came up with that kind of idea. Like if it was Alexander Payne's idea to frame it like that, or was originally in the book. Because I never read the book.
I didn't get a chance to read the book either. I usually when I do these kind of things, I think come to think of it, I think this is the first episode I'm doing where I'm covering an adapted screenplay nominee. I'm pretty sure it is, because if that's the case, then yeah, okay, yeah, I probably didn't know. But yeah, no, I didn't get a chance to read the book. Because like I usually do with these episodes, I watch the movie usually a night or two before we record. um and it's kind of, for me to grab any kind of source material prior to, unless if it's like a really small, like the Brokeback Mountain source material, where it's like it's like a poem almost. um but yeah, I don't know how it was from the book in terms of that aspect of it, like how they deliver that scene of her throwing away the posters. But I do know that I'm not sure if you're aware of this, they did change the ending of the film. So the original ending of the film, which I think was on a couple of like work prints, for like VHS copies, and the work print ending involved Matthew Broderick. Have you heard of this ending or no?
I After I saw the film, I read about it, but I know for a fact there was an alternate ending. It didn't play well, right? Like when they test screened it.
Yeah, so essentially what it is, for anyone who isn't aware, Matthew Broderick does not move out of the Omaha area and doesn't go to New York City. Instead, he becomes like a used car salesman and decides to, and ends up seeing Tracy out on the lot and tries to sell her a car. And eventually they reach a point where they talk to each other. He tries to give her advice on things, and she ends up asking him to sign his yearbook. And it's essentially this way of realizing maybe these two characters, who are very flawed in their own ways, can actually find some sort of uh like a conclusion to their own world, so to speak. And while it kind of, I'm pretty sure that was in the book, it doesn't really fit with what the film is trying to go for tonally, because the tonally, like I said, it has this bite to it, and it's very funny, and it can be very very dark in terms of some of its humor. Like I said, the underage teacher relationship, even with Matthew Broderick having those images of him trying to get his wife pregnant, things like that. It's like, okay, yeah, that's very much not in line for the tone that they're going for. I am, if nothing else, I'm kind of curious in seeing a little bit more of Tom Perrotta's work, because I think he's had some of his work either been adapted in the past, or because yeah, because I'm reading here right now, he's been nominated for Little Children with Todd Field, where he co-wrote a version of, well, he co-wrote the script with Todd Field and adapted his I believe his own book from it. And I'm looking through to see if there's any other stuff he's done. um okay, yeah, there was someone else then. But yeah, no, so yeah, so I'd be curious to know a little bit more about Tom Perrotta's material, because I'm not really all that familiar with his stuff. This is like the first thing I've seen him had any hand in doing, even though he didn't write the script. but his source material was used for the film. So yeah, I'd be curious to see what kind of style he has going for as a whole with his work. But as far as the election film goes, I'm glad that they changed the ending because yeah, like as you said, that didn't test well. They switched it out for the ending that we got, which is Matthew Broderick is barely coping by as like a uh was it like a museum guide
Yeah,
expert.
like and I especially love the ending where I think it's like the final scene where he's like doing the tour and he's like any
Yes.
questions and he sees like a girl and it reminded
Yeah,
him of
dressed up
Tracy
like
and you
yeah.
yeah.
That was good. I was like, "Oh, yeah, this
Yeah.
ending cycle of like you're never like that was a good way to end it cuz and I love the part where I think it was Jim Taylor or Alexander Payne, one of them thought of it. It was like, "Well, why don't we have Matthew Broderick just throw the drink at her in the car?" Because in the ending he sees Tracy Flick with a senator across the street, and she ends up going into his car as like an aide or representative with him, talking about political plans, and then yeah, he just gets this whole rage of like blaming all of his frustration onto her. And I thought that was pretty funny. And then he just throws the cup, the car stops, he's like, "Oh shit," and he just starts running. That was good. I thought, okay, that was pretty funny. Yeah, I'm looking through my notes. The other thing I wanted to comment about the opening of the movie, because we start off with Matthew Broderick's character who is doing his whole run, and he does his whole morning wake up stuff. I really liked the composition they had cinematography wise, like in terms of the not necessarily the lighting, but more of like how it's framed, and even the way that they use a fair amount of jump cuts, especially with her trying to overdo the like extending of the tables when she does her own class president, uh, you know, campaigning, so to speak. I thought that was cool, and and the film uses for a film that's like under 2 hours long, it moves by like a steady rate.
Hmm.
And I would say that's probably one of my complaints with the film a little bit, is that for a movie that's an hour and 46 minutes, it does feel like it slows down at times. And obviously you're going to go over four characters, and we should also mention that there's the Chris Klein character, there's also the Tammy Metzler character, who was played by, I'm looking up who it was. It was
Jessica
someone.
Campbell.
Yes, Jessica Campbell, who is unfortunately no longer with us. Rest in peace.
Wait, what?
Um, yeah, I found out the other day she actually died 3 years ago. Um,
Oh,
which I was not aware of. I looked up what was her cause of death, but it wasn't publicly reported. Yeah, she died at 38.
oh my
Um,
God.
I was shocked too. I was like, really? Holy crap. Yeah, and the only kind of like major roles that she had done, she got nominated for debut performance for Election from the Spirit Award, but she didn't win. She had done a couple episodes on Freaks and Geeks, and she retired from acting in 2002 and became a was it naturopathic pathic practitioner. Um, and then yeah, she died December 29th, 2020. So
What the hell?
yeah.
It's crazy, man.
Yeah, it's a shame because I would have been curious to see what her acting career would have been, because she did a good job in the role. And the other actor I want to bring up is Nicholas D'Acosto, who was on shows like Masters of Sex, Gotham, Heroes, and The Office, and he was also in a lead role for Final Destination 5, in which he was yeah, he was the kid in any. In case anyone's wondering, he's one of the kids who did The Counting, the one who went with Matthew Broderick into the headmaster or principal's office. And yeah, when I saw his face, I was like, "Huh, they looked familiar."
Yeah.
I wasn't too sure of like who that was, but I was like, okay, yeah. But yeah, no, everyone in the cast did a pretty good job, I thought, and I'm looking through my notes to see if there's anything else. Oh, the other thing I was going to say was I love the way they used freeze frames for the movie, because I thought, usually when you do freeze frames, it's very, generic or stereotypically used. But I loved when, as she was trying to explain the whole moral and ethics debate or discussion, like she does this like twitch in her eyes almost, it looks like, and then it freeze frames on her, and I thought that was great, and even just the way they use it throughout the film, I thought was pretty good. Oh yeah, and the other comment I was gonna make about Reese Witherspoon, because I think she's got some great one liners. She says, and if you try to interfere, talking about Matthew Broderick's character, and if you try to interfere, the same thing's just gonna happen anyway, and you'll just suffer. And I'm like, damn, what a roast. Um, but yeah, I'm just looking through to see if there's any other notes. Oh, the other thing I was gonna comment, I'm not sure if you noticed this, because I think we had talked about before we started the call that I assume you had seen the holdovers
Mhm.
before. Did you notice that this election and the holdovers had at least one shot where there was like a Dutch angle? I'm not sure if you noticed
I
that, because
don't.
there was one quick shot in this film where Nicholas is accusing Matthew Broderick in the principal's office, and the Dutch angle is like this way, and I'm like, what the hell? And then I remember, because I remember the holdovers he did that. I'm like, oh, that's a weird way to frame, because in the holdovers essentially it's just Paul Giamatti talking with Divine Joy Randolph while she's cooking something in the morning, and then it's like, oh, okay, that's weird, but okay, whatever. And then I see election, I'm like, wait, he did it again. Okay,
I
that's I didn't even notice that.
Wow, I
Um,
didn't even notice either until you brought it up.
yeah, it was odd. Yeah, that it took. I don't know. Maybe I'll have to rewatch some of Alexander Payne's films, because maybe he has a couple in there that I just was not aware of.
Yeah.
Uh, I did like, in terms of editing too, I like the smash cut to Tracy crying in her bed, was in her bed with her eyes out after Chris Klein asked Matthew Broderick at the restaurant, "Do you think Tracy's gonna be okay?" "Oh yeah, I think she's gonna be just fine." And then she's like crying her eyes
That
out
was
like a little kid.
perfect.
Yeah,
Perfect.
and even with her mom coming in, like giving her the medicine and water, and then right as she's trying to get some sleep, she's like, maybe it was the fact that you didn't campaign too much with those posters. Maybe that's why you didn't win. And I'm like, wow, what a little bitch.
I know.
um, but yeah, no, I thought that was really funny. And there was one comment I wanted to make that I did not know about until after the movie was done. There's a sense of irony that Jim, who's the Matthew Broderick character, he's trying to teach moral and ethics to class, and eventually breaks both of them by trying to cheat on his wife's friend, and then rigging the class presidential election. And it's funny when how the bell rings when she's trying to explain both of them, and once the bell rings, Tracy is trying to explain the two of them, and he's like, "Okay, that's it for class. Bye, bye, guys." And I'm like, it's funny how like, I don't know if it's that was it was probably intentional, but that sense of irony of like, you're trying to teach moral and ethics, and you're trying to have her, she's the know-it-all. She's trying to tell everyone what it is, and it's almost like he's kind of zoned out, and he just doesn't want to hear the answer being taught upon him himself.
I
Um,
really That's a good point. I also really love how Matthew Broderick, at least for me, he offers a contrasting perspective on ambition and morality, because he's really a walking hypocrite.
yeah,
He I think that's why I mostly love his performance even more, because he is so unlikable. You can't root for him like at all, because he's real. I mean, at first, when the movie starts, at first you're like, wow, I like this guy. He's a hard worker. But then as the movie goes on, you're like, when given the chance, he does a lot of bad things when he's given the option.
yeah, and the reason why, I think part of the reason why he's not considered such a bad person at the beginning is because there's someone even worse than him, which is Dave. who has that relationship with Tracy. And once he's sort of kicked out of the picture, and it's like, oh no, okay, so Matthew Broderick was just another Dave just hidden inside. It's just a different kind of way,
And
and that he is this horrible person.
thing is,
Um,
they make it like, don't they make it clear from the beginning that he's always like was in was in love with his friend's wife? Like they make it clear from the beginning. He's
yeah,
like she or he doesn't deserve her. Like how could he do this to her? It is. They make
yeah,
it very obvious, and there was little signs there that he was going to go on this dark path. Despite it being a
mhm.
comedy, his life, my God, it is very dark.
Yeah, and and it's funny, yeah, because it's very much like, even with him realizing that Tracy is won the election, it's like he could have just easily let that go, and we wouldn't get this whole avalanche of a fall for him. But the moment he decides to say, you know what, I'm gonna make sure this other guy wins, this like monotone delivered jock with uh like a what do you call it, like an air cast almost. I'm gonna let him be the one to
And
win the election. um and yeah, and the other comment I don't think we even brought up at all during our conversation is the film is very much clearly trying to be a satirical political film, so to speak, in that it is, at least the novel was inspired by the two key events, which were the 1992, the first one was the 1992 US presidential election, in which Ross Perot entered as a third party candidate, a move echoed by Tammy Metzler, and the 1992 incident at Memorial High School in Wisconsin, in which a pregnant student was elected homecoming queen, but staff announced a different winner and burned the ballots to cover it up. So that's the kind of the inspiration into the book. I'm pretty sure that like the manuscript that Tom Perrotta wrote, and kind of ties into this too. Like it is very much a satirical take on that election, and you could also consider that even to
no,
nowadays, because even some of the commentators on the behind the scenes stuff, they were mentioning, this was back in like 2016, how some women within the political party could consider themselves a little bit like Tracy Flick, so to speak, with that persona. And the other thing I was going to mention too, in regards to some of the choices they did, I like the music that they did when like she sees Paul, running for campaigning against her. I thought that was great. I was laughing my ass off. I
yes,
thought that
no,
was funny, and she has this like anger in her eyes.
and
And
like the soundtrack especially, it
mhm.
contributes a lot. It just contributes a lot to the atmosphere and the story overall. It contributes. I just love it. And like you said, that scene specifically where she sees that he's running against her. That, my God.
Yeah, no, I thought that was very funny, and like I said, yeah, it's just a really, like, it's a solid movie that has some really good writing by Alexander Payne and Jim Taylor, and there's a reason why these guys, I'm pretty sure both of them had worked together uh, for a couple of years. I'm looking through their filmography. Actually, I'm going to look through Alexander's filmography right now.
Oh,
Uh,
I
they worked on About Schmidt together.
they did.
Uh,
Wait,
yes, yeah,
I did not know Alexander
Alexander
Payne
Payne.
made that movie. Wow.
Yeah, Alexander Payne and Jim Taylor wrote that script. I also remember too, because that had won a Golden Globe for screenplay, but it was not nominated at the Academy Awards that year.
Oh wow.
In fact, they didn't actually, screenplay wise, they didn't even get in anywhere. Period. But yeah, I'm looking through. So they worked together on About Schmidt, Sideways, and then they teamed back up for Downsizing. But I wonder if Downsizing was part of it was just because of them writing it over the years as they were doing other projects. And I'm looking through here. They also had a hand in writing a draft for Jurassic Park 3, and I now pronounce you Chuck and Larry, which,
That is, you blew my mind. Oh, what the fuck.
yeah.
Huh.
And then they had like an uncredited rewrite on Meet the Parents. So
Hmm.
yeah.
Interesting.
But yeah, so no, yeah, so they've worked together before. I know Jim Taylor was a producer on The Descendants as well. But Alexander Payne only, he didn't co-write it with Jim Taylor. He did write The Descendants with Nat Faxon and Jim Rash. And yeah, the rest is history, pretty much.
Yeah.
So yeah, I like I said, yeah, if we're gonna be going into our final thoughts on the movie itself, then we'll get into the awards section real quick. But as far as do you have any other final thoughts you wanted to give on the movie?
Well, I mean, I just love how this was also a good acting showcase for Reese Witherspoon. She
Mm-hmm.
really portrayed Tracy with a lot of nuance in her character. We see her grow, though not for the best at times, but she does go
Yeah,
through a lot. I also love the movie overall. I just feel was very clever in the way it was structured and how we see multiple perspectives. So that way, it's not just this is how he sees it or this is how she sees it. We see it from four different views, and I think that was really done well. And I love Alexander Payne's use of dark comedy, and he adds a lot of complexity to the movie overall. And it for a comedy, he just knocks it out of the park.
yeah, he does. He's got some funny bits in uh what was it? Sideways was one. He's got some really funny bits there. And yeah, some of the Descendants and even Holdovers, there's some funny bits. I know he didn't write the Holdovers, but he did direct it. And there's some funny comedic banter there too. I thought was quite good directing wise. But yeah, no, he's also good here with comedic angle with the comedy. There was, if I could mention real quick and then we'll get on to the award section. There was one shot I thought was really great, and it was the way that the focus pull was done, where Tracy asked the teacher played by Matthew Broderick's character, would you like a cupcake? And the way that the focus pull moves from her face to the cupcake when it says pick flick on it, I thought that was really great. And I love that. And it's funny because I think on the Criterion version, that's the like the cover art of the front of the Blu-ray is like a cupcake that says pick flick. And I'm like, yeah, it's a pretty good similar, like a good like idea of what you're in for with the film. And it's a very comedic, very funny at times, uh political comedy. And yeah, just it does the
Yeah,
satire pretty well.
yeah, and
um
Tracy especially, she the way she's written is that she is such a good representation of relentless, like a relentless pursuit of success. And as
yeah,
you could tell, I guarantee you she'd kill someone if given the chance to succeed, because just the way she is. And I gosh, she's her character is just written so well. Like you could tell there's a lot of passion in the writing.
yeah. And she does a good job with the role, as you said, with it. And I think this was also the same year that Cruel Intentions came out as well. And then I think like a couple of years later, or maybe it was like, yeah, no, it might have been a couple of years later, she did Legally Blonde. And then eventually she got her Oscar for Walk the Line. um yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, I'm really glad that this definitely put her on the map. And actually she was even in, it's like the year before, I think she was also in a movie called Pleasantville, and she was with actors like Toby Maguire, William H Macy, Joan Allen, and the late Paul Walker as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'll have to rewatch Pleasantville in the future because it's been a while since I've seen it, and I remembered enjoying it a lot for what it was. So I'll have to rewatch that. Um,
Hmm.
anyways, so yeah, so before we get going, I just have a couple of awards questions to ask you regarding with the film.
Go ahead.
uh would you, outside, did you think this was worthy of its lone screenplay nomination? And assuming, I think, I can kind of guess where your answer is going to be, but Why exactly did you think it was like deserving? If you think that that's the case.
Uh, First of all, yes, I think it was very deserving. To be honest, I don't think it was. I think Alone Screenplay nom was more than fine. I don't think it should have gotten any acting nominations, as I've heard. A lot of people say they said it should have gotten Reese Witherspoon a nom. I don't think so. I thought she was good, but not Oscar worthy. But I just love the screenplay is just really genius, and it's the way it's structured, a lot of multiple perspectives. It's a really good screenplay and adaptation, and I also
Mhm.
love it's a very good observation on human behavior, and that itself enhances the storytelling. So I just love it.
Yeah, he what was it? Yeah, I'm really glad for the adapted screenplay nomination for sure. I don't know if the Academy would have gone for this kind of performance though, because I keep thinking to myself, even looking at the lead actress lineup alone with someone, on the top of my head with Meryl Streep for Music of the Heart and Annette Bening with American Beauty, which was like a Best Picture frontrunner. And then you had this like transformative performance by Hilary Swank in Boys Don't Cry. I don't know if the Academy would have gone for that performance though with Reese Witherspoon because it's kind of like a tight cat lineup to begin with, and it's not really the type of performance that they would go for. I'm looking through here, Janet McTeer for Tumbleweeds, which was like an independent. I think it was an independent film. Uh, yeah, very independent. So it was like
Oh
$300,000
wow.
for Tumbleweeds, and then The End of the Affair, which was a box office flop, but it was like a romantic drama, and it's directed by Neil Jordan, who had won an Oscar before. And looking through here, it's based off a book by Graham Greene. Okay, interesting. Yeah, so yeah, it's kind of a tough. It's kind of tough to get in for that kind of performance for the Oscars. Makes me wonder if, not to jump ahead, but it makes me wonder if Jeffrey Wright is all that safe for a lead actor, if that's the kind of performance they're going to go for, if that's the kind of performance he's giving, when they usually give it to like a lot of showier performances. We'll see.
That's why I
Um,
mean that's why I have a missing. But hey, the Oscars do change over time, so it's not impossible. But he's not exactly full on comedic like Tracy Flick. He doesn't have tantrums, but he is a very Monk is a
mhm.
very serious person. So yes, even though American Fiction is a comedy, the type of character that he portrays could get in. When you see the movie, you'll
Hmm.
understand. I promise.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'll be seeing it in like December. So,
yeah.
um,
But trust me, like the performance he gives, the Academy would go for that.
okay.
And if it gets in Best Picture, he's gonna get in Best Actor. I cannot imagine a world where that does not happen.
All right. Yeah, we'll save we'll
Yeah.
save more of our thoughts on American Fiction for another time. Um but yeah, no, that's pretty much, yeah, like out of all the like Oscar categories, I would say yeah, adapted screenplay would be like the biggest one, I'd say. And I think 1999, that was the first year that the American Cinema Editors Guild, ACE, split their categories from drama and comedy slash musical.
Mm, wow.
Um and I'm pretty sure, and I could be mistaken, but I think it was also nominated for. Yeah, I'm looking through. Yeah, so Election was nominated for the comedy musical category for Ace Eddies, as they call themselves, alongside with Analyze This, Man on the Moon, Run Lola Run, and Being John Malkovich, which won the comedy musical category.
That was a good win. Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't seen Being John Malkovich yet,
Oh,
so
you should. It's
I'll get
it's,
around to it.
it's real good.
I I know. Yeah, it's Spike Jones and Charlie Kaufman, so I'll get around to it in the future. But yeah, and 1999 was just such a great year in film to begin with. You have Toy Story 2, American Beauty, Magnolia, The Insider, which was really great, and Green Mile. Yeah, there's just a lot of great ones. The Sixth Sense, which was like a box office hit. But yeah, so yeah, don't really have too much thoughts on the awards section of the film this time around, just because, like I said, it's just it's kind of obvious the moment you see the movie as to why it got the lone screenplay nomination and why it didn't get much else, just because it's just too small of a film. And I just, even if you were to expand the lineup of 10, I think there's 5 other films I think the Academy would have easily gone for, especially with something like maybe The Matrix, definitely Magnolia, being John Malkovich because it got that director nomination. It just,
Yeah.
so but that's okay.
Yeah.
He got the screenplay nomination. That's good enough. And Alexander Payne and Jim Taylor would go on to win their Oscar, like I said, for Sideways, so they're okay. So that's pretty much that. Unless you want to add any other comments before we sign off.
No, I just love the movie.
All right,
Yeah.
awesome. Well, I just want to say thank you again, Roberto, for dedicating your time to being here on the show. Before we sign off, is there anything you'd like to plug in for our listeners for where they could follow you along?
Yeah, my Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd are all the same. It's the Club Ortiz. I mostly post my reviews on Letterboxd and Instagram, as I said before. But you know, if you want to read, that's fine. I just do it for fun. I don't do it for any following. I just do it because it's very it just makes me happy just to write about the movies I see. And you do see that in my writing. At least I hope so.
Yeah, no, I do. I mean, there's a reason why I'm very selective with my choices. So but yeah, no, I figured why not have you on the show. But yeah, so yeah, as for me, as always, you can follow me and the show through Linktree under @Matthew995, where you can follow along on all my social media platforms such as Twitter and Letterboxd. On the same site, I provide a link for where you can listen to more episodes of the show. And if you're interested in being in the hot seat, let me know, and hopefully we can arrange that happening soon. In the meantime, we hope you enjoyed listening to this episode, and we hope to see you at the movies. Take care, guys.